Hello all and welcome to the continuation of 13.4 Part 2 Amortization Schedule. So once the irregular monthly payment has been determined, an amortization schedule or repayment can be generated. It will show an allotment of payments for interest and principal and the principal balance for one or more months during the life of the loan. So let's look at this example. We're going to use the information from the last example to fill in the table. So we started with $80,000 and we found that the interest for the monthly payment was 515.44. And that's what we got over here. So how we did this was we went ahead and we saw the 6% under the monthly mortgage and we got 6.44301, which was 80 times 6.44301, which gave us the 515.44. Now, in order for us to find the interest payment, we have to find this formula, which is the following. So it's going to be your principal amount. So it's P times R. R is going to be the value of the rate over N, the monthly payments, times, well, it could be R over N or R times 112. So let me change this. So we know that the rate was 0.06. It was 80,000. So it's 80,000 times 0.06 divided by 12. We got 400. That's this value. That's the first payment. But we know that it was 515.44. So then if we subtract 515.44 from 400, that's going to be 115.44. Now, if we subtract 80,000 minus 115.44, which was the principal amount, so let's go ahead and do that. So we have 80,000, 1, 2, 3, minus 115.44. That's going to give me my 79,000. That's going to be this value, 79,884.56. Now, if I want to find the value of the interest payment for the 79,884.56, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do the 79,884.56 times the rate over N, which is 0.06 over 12. We get 399.42. That's just the interest payment. Now we want to find the principal payment. Well, we know it's 500, the original 515.44 minus the 399.42. So that's should be this value. So let's go ahead and plug it in our calculator. So 515.44 minus 399.42 should give me 116.02. Now, to find the remaining balance, I have to do 79,000 minus the 116. So it's going to be 79. Oops. I'm deducting 79,884 minus, 0.56 minus 116.02. And that's going to give me 79,000. 768.54. So then I would do the same thing for the third month. So for the third payment, now I would have to take this value, multiply by 0.06 over 12, get this interest minus the 515. So there it is. And that's the solution that we got. So we're following that formula all over again. Okay. Now there exists this adjustable rate mortgage. So this Adjustable rate mortgage is also known as the variable rate mortgage. So it generally starts out with the lower rate, but then the rate changes periodically, reflecting changes in prevailing rate. So you would have an adjustable depending on your mortgage, is it increasing or decreasing? So it's called an adjustable rate mortgage or a variable rate mortgage. Now, the quantities governing adjustable rate mortgages, there's an adjustment period, the time interval, which is the definition, the time interval between rate adjustments. So it's typically 1, 3, or 5 years. These are the typical. The index is the standard fluctuating average that is basis for new adjust rates. Again, typically 1, 3, or 5 years. The U.S. Treasury security rate or a national regional cost of funds index. So this one's already predetermined. There's also the margin, which is the additional amount added to the index by the lender, typically by a few percentage points. So again, this is the margin is the quantity added by a lender. The discount amount by which the initial rate may be less than the sum of the index. This is the typically arranged best between the seller and the lender. Okay, so there's also a discount from this initial rate. Now, what are the quantities governing adjustable rate mortgages? Again, these are all pure definitions. The interest rate cap, those are limits on interest rates. Periodic cap is the limit on rates that increase per adjustment period, typically about 1% per 6 months or 2% per year. There's an overall limit of increases over a life loan. It's typically about 5% total. There's a payment gap. So there's a periodic cap, an overall cap, a payment cap. The payment cap is the limit on how much the payment can increase at each adjustment. And then there's also a negative amortization, which is an increasing loan principal, perhaps caused by a payment cap, covering from a higher interest rate. So for example, if you gave more money the first few months than the following months, that also can create negative amortization. So the continuation of these definitions are convertibility feature, which is a contractual ability to convert a fixed mortgage, usually at a certain designated points in time. There's also the prepayment penalty, which are charges imposed by the lender if payments are made early. So this is interesting. So they can charge you if you finish your payment within a smaller amount. Those are prepayment penalties. So let's look at this example. What's ARM? This ARM, is what we discussed up here. This adjustable rate mortgage, ARM. So there is a formula for finding this adjustable rate mortgage. So suppose that for 120,000 home, you take out a 1-year RM for 30 years. The lender uses the 1 Treasury index, previously 4.5 and 2% margin. Find your monthly payment for the first year. Okay, well, first, the first year rate, there it is, the 4.5 plus the 2% margin should be 6.5%. That is just to find the percentage. So first, step 1, you have to find the percentage. Why do you need to find the percentage? Because you're going to have to look at the table of the monthly payments. So that was given, it was previously 4.5. So you add the first year lender plus the 2% margin. Remember the 2% margin, the margin is what's being added. Oops, that's over, where's the margin? Here, the margin is the additional amount covered by the lender. So it's the Treasury plus the lender. So that's 6.5%. So now you're going to use this 6.5%. So you're going to look for 6.5% for a 30-year loan. Now, remember, if this is 1,000, but the home is 120,000, now you're gonna look for 120. So then, remember that the value of a monthly payment, if we go back, if you're looking for a monthly payment, it's always going to be for a monthly payment, the value times the what you get on the table. So again, over here, this is what we're using. So when we're using the table, if we go to, I'll show you where the table is. So let me show you where the table is. The table should be the monthly mortgage on your modules. So if you go to this week's modules, week 13. So if you go to week 13 and you go to the monthly mortgage table, and there it is. So you're looking for 6.5%, and the years is 30 years. So then you're going to scroll down, and that should give me 6.32. 6.32068. Now, this is the mortgage on a 1,000 mortgage. It's 120,000. So then you're going to have to multiply that by 120. So let me go back to my notes. So this formula is for $1,000 mortgage. So that was what we found for the 6.5% for a 30-year. That was H. Remember, this H times the number of the value of the home. The house was 120,000 divided by 1,000 mortgage home. That's 120. So you do H times the price, in this case, times the value. So here we have our H from the table, 6.3268 times 120. We get our monthly payment to be 658.48. But we first had to find the index plus the margin. That's the formula for the first year rate. Index rate plus the margin. We had the index rate from the Treasury index, and the 2% margin. Okay. Now the seller buy down, a seller buy down occurs when the seller or a new home builder, for example, pays the lender an amount in order for the discount the buyer loan. This reduces the initial. So this is the seller buy down. So that one is if we were doing the discount. Where's the discount? That's the discount. The initial raise, this would be between the seller and the lender. So that would be the discount. That's what we're looking at right now. So this reduces the initial rate and the monthly payment, thereby the buyer, thereby giving the buyer a better chance to qualify for the loan, but it may be combined with a higher initial fee or a home price. So closing cost, the definition of a closing cost, there are some significant one-time expenses that apply to both fixed rate and adjustable rate mortgages and are paid when the mortgage is originally set up. So together, these charges are called closing cost or settlement charges. The closing or settlement occurs when all the details of the transaction has been determined and the final contracts are signed. So when you have a closing contract, a closing cost, a settlement is where you already know the time, the time it's going to take you to purchase a home, the monthly mortgage payments, the rate, the fixed mortgage rates, and everything together. So the closing cost is when you kind of already have everything settled. Okay. So let's look at this one. Computing total closing cost. So this is an $85,000 mortgage. This is like super cheap. The borrower was charged for the following closing costs. So look at this. So the broker has, so it's $85,000 for the mortgage. That's just the mortgage. $85,000 plus every single thing. The broker loan fee, the lender, so you're going to have to add the 1640, the 350, the 210, the 225, the 320, the plus 70, plus 40. So in reality, the home is going to cost you more because there's fees all over the place. There's a broker fee, the lender tax wires, the fees to the title company, the title for the insurance, the title for a reconveyance fee. So if you bought a house before, you know it's not just the mortgage, but it's everything together. So the total closing cost. So the first is you look at if I didn't read that first part. So the loan original fee is 1% of the mortgage. So let's add that. So it's 85,000 times 0.01. So that's what we need to add. And that gives me 850. Now that's what I have to add here. 850. This is plus 850, not 85,000, sorry. So it's 850 plus 1,100. So the loan of the original fee is 1% of the mortgage. So I have to fill in the blank right there. 85,000 times 0.01. That gives me 850. Now I have to tally all of these to get myself my closing cost. So my closing cost would be 850 plus everything else. So let's see if that gives me my 3,705. So let's punch that in a calculator. So if I plug in 850 plus 1,600 and, I can't tell, 1640 plus 350 plus 210 plus 225 plus 320 plus 70 plus 40. And that gives me my total of $3,705, which is my closing, my total sum. Okay. Now let's talk about the definition of a point. So points are loans origination fees. So these are loan origination fees that are commonly referred as points. So each point amounts to 1% of the mortgage amount. By imposing points, the lender can raise the interest rate without raising the monthly payments because the points are typically paid at closing. So for example, here, that 1%, that loan of those 1% of the mortgage was those points. That was each point. So each point amounts to 1% of the mortgage amount. So it's not necessarily increasing the interest rate, but it does increase the amount of money. So everything counts. So again, if you've been a homeowner, then you know what this is about. There's also taxes, insurance, and maintenance you have to cover, like fees. So the primary financial consideration for most new homeowners are the following. You have to have some certain down payment, accumulating a down payment, having sufficient cash and income for the qualification of a loan, and making the mortgage payment. So before you even decide to own a house, you know that they run your credit, how much income you do per year, if you have a stable job, if, for example, you're going to be able to qualify for the loan. The lender has to make sure that you're going to have to pay them back. You have enough cash to kind of do a start off. Sometimes when you buy a house, you have to have maintenance for the house. So what if there's some contractors where you can kind of hire and check, oh, well, look at the draining pipes. You kind of have to do an inspection before you actually purchase a home. So all of these details are covered here. There's also property taxes. So there's a property taxes collected by the county or local government, property taxes, and also mortgage interest are deductible on your income taxes. So the good thing is when you have a home and you put that in your taxes, it kind of reduces, it has a deductible. There exists homeowners insurance. So let's say you need to have that home owner's insurance for the lender's purposes, making sure that if your house goes on fire, anything of that nature, it usually covers losses due to the fire, storm, and other casualties. So things that are outside your nature. So homes are also required maintenance, but these costs can vary. Of course, if you want to do a maintenance in your house, you want to do a renovation, you have to let the government know, the county, and all the good stuff. So let's look at this example. So taxes and insurance. So a couple has a 25-year, $175,000 fixed rate. There's the percentage loan. They owe $2,800 in annual taxes and $700 annually for a homeowner insurance. What is their net monthly expenditure? So first of all, the monthly mortgage payment will be, well, it's causing you 175,000. The loan is 7% and it's 25 years. Then you have to look at the monthly mortgage payment. So the monthly mortgage from the taxes and insurance, just looking at the insurance itself, it's going to be 2,800 plus the 750 divided by 12. That gives you a total of $295.83. Now, you're going to take that value and decreased by the 1,500, which is your fixed rate. When you take your 175,000 minus the 295 would be 1,532.69. So the monthly payment should be available. Okay, so for example, this was a 7% annual with a 25%. Sorry, within 25 years. So we're going to look at our table again. So there's our table. So we're looking at a 7% annual, 25. So it looks like it's 7.06779. So your monthly mortgage times 175,000. So that's 175. So if I'm finding the value of my monthly mortgage payment, that's going to be $175. Sorry, 175 times my 7.06 to 1,236.86. So again, we're grabbing this from the table. So this value of your monthly mortgage payment of 1,236 comes from the table. So we know this was 7% and 25 years. And the value here, 175, is 175,000 over 1,000, which is 175. So then you always do, you're going to be looking at your table. So you make sure that you know how to read the table. So you're going to add your monthly mortgage payment with the value. So that's the monthly mortgage. There's the taxes and insurance just at the insurance. It's the 295. So then you're going to, oops, let me remove this. So it's going to be your monthly mortgage payment, 1,236.86 plus the 295.83. That should give you your 1,532.69. And that's the solution for finding the taxes and insurance with the monthly mortgage payment. What is the net average monthly expenditure? So you're going to take your monthly mortgage payment added with the taxes and insurance. Okay. And we got the monthly mortgage payment from the table. And that terminates this section. Thank you, and I will see you on the next recording. Bye.